I call the advisory committee meeting for April 12th, 2022 to order at 7:01 p.m. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone else recording the meeting this evening? Seeing no one, hearing no one. Are there comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? Okay, then we get to review and approval of minutes from March 15th, 2022. Can we go ahead, Nancy?
I did not receive any comments from the group. So speak now or forever hold your peace.
I reviewed the minutes. I thought they looked good, and I would move to approve them.
You've reached peak performance, Nancy. It's just like, got it down.
It was a slog in the beginning, but the last two have been fantastic, apparently.
Any other commentary before we approve? I heard a motion. I heard a second. Okay, then we will vote. Bob?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Daveline?
Aye.
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Caitlin?
Aye.
All right. Now that Sarah's going to be late. And let's see, Evan is traveling, then he might come on. I'm not really sure where he is in the travel process. And Al McDonald has a meeting tonight. So
I had 11.
okay. Yeah, that's what I had to. Okay, great. So next up, we have town meeting preparation. This is it. We're almost there. So as you know, it's on April 30th, which is a Saturday at 2 p.m. I'm going to go over the particulars of town meeting, how it's going to be set up, all that jazz in a little bit. But what I want to do first tonight for town meeting preparation is I want to go through the warrant article list to make sure everyone knows who's going to speak if necessary. There will be many articles where there is a sponsor or a select board member who may speak first, and AdCom might play a supporting role. That will all get worked out during the moderators meeting on April 28th, but we have to make sure that we all understand who's going to talk when. And we're going to brainstorm some potential questions that may come up. Number two, we're going to talk about the budget in Article 6, because within Article 6, there are individual budgets, of course. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands or remembers the budgets for which they were liaisons this year, because questions do come up. I think you would ask former AdCom member Erin Kelly that she still probably has nightmares about the year that she had the question about the fire department budget right in the middle of Article 6. So, and then finally, we'll talk about the details of the meeting on April 30th. So I have a list of the warrant articles. And by the way, the warrant is on the town's website, and it has been for a couple of weeks. And I probably should have emailed you to tell you, hey, it's out there, but it is. So, you know, it's in the printing and mailing process right now, and we should get our printed copy pretty soon, but the whole thing is on the website. And it's very interesting to see it because it is laid out differently this year. Instead of 2 columns per page, it's 1 column or 1 full page of text. So that's interesting. So what I'm going to do is just go through one by one the warrant articles. We'll run through it quickly. We won't dwell too long, but if you think of any question that might be a question that would be a good question that town meeting may ask, you could throw that out right now, and the liaison who's in charge of that article can make a note of it. I will say, though, for any article that has a funding source, one question that I had one year was, why were we borrowing for that one particular article? Do you remember that, Sue? Because I'll never forget, because I was like, I don't know why we were borrowing, but anyway, so I just want to point out that there could be that question for any article that you have that involves funding, and we can talk about that. But I think one of the easy answers is that you can't fund everything through cash or through debt service within the levy. And there was a list that was put together by the town's finance team of what articles would be borrowing and what articles would be paid for out of fund balance, etc. So I can resend that list and write up a little quick answer to you all, but you can answer it any way you want if it came up, but it's just, you have to make decisions about how the articles are being funded, and there are different ways. Okay, so number one is the Hannah Lincoln Whiting Fund and / trustees of the Bathing Beach. So Matt is not going to be with us on April 30th, which is very sad. So he is casting off some of his articles to other AdCom members. So I'm going to give that one to Sarah Amelia. She's not here yet, but I thought about maybe giving it to Evan because that would be fun, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give that to Sarah. I mean, you never know, but someone might have a big question about Hannah. And then number two, also Matt's original article, is to assume the liability for DCR on rivers, harbors, etc. And Caitlin, if you could take that article from Matt and then just sort of check in with him or just read up the comment on that article. And then number three, I have reports of various town committees. That was Sarah Amelia's article. Then I have the report of the personnel board, Kristen. Salaries of town officers, Bob. Again, if you think of an interesting question that may come up at town meeting, feel free to jump and just say it out loud. You don't have to raise your hand. And then next up we have Article 6, which is the budgets. So George wrote the comment for Article 6. So perhaps if there was any question about the comment itself, George, would you want to talk to that, or I could? I don't remember, Bob, if the chair is the one who has to talk about Article 6.
Well, you make your 6-minute speech,
Yes.
which is basically going to address, I would think, from the AdCom perspective, at least the 30,000-foot overview of the budget.
Mhm.
And I would think it would be appropriate for George to do a follow-up on that in the event that something arose, or, typically I think the way things come up is there's a hold on a particular budget.
Yeah.
And then it becomes the responsibility of the liaison for that budget to speak to whatever question arises.
Okay.
I know Jim Taylor saved me one year. There was a hold on some tiny little travel expense, I think, for the town accountant.
Oh, I don't think it was the town accountant. But
No,
Go
I think
ahead,
it
blame it on Sue.
I think it went back to the TED days when maybe I think I was a rookie on the AdCom, and there was like $150 expense for, travel, and Jim Taylor, pulled it out of, the cloud that he remembered that this was what that was all about. But you can get strange little questions about small numbers.
Yes, indeed. So we're going to circle back to Article 6 and just run through the budget assignments again, just to clear out all the cobwebs. But so we make sure that we can answer any questions that may come up. So Article 7 is the transfer from the stabilization fund, and that's Caitlin. Then we have disbursement of electric light department receipts. That's also Caitlin.
Julie.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed my opportunity there because my 13-year-old was texting me. I'm going back on Article 6 for a second. This is the first year in my recollection that the school committee has deviated from our vote, at least as far as the warrant is concerned. And I don't think I ever recall the school committee speaking to their budget. And, you know, I mean, there's just so many uncertainties this year. I just didn't know if you had any insights into whether, I mean, I know we can cover it in the ACES report, but if you had any wisdom about whether Article 6 is a potential hold this year or if it's just going to carry on.
Well, it'll certainly come up with your ACES liaison update, Dave, but I have not heard anything specific about any holds that would be placed on the education budget. And I
Okay,
think
because I can certainly be prepared to speak on behalf of ACES if necessary, but you know,
I
it's,
have you down for that.
yeah, I thought you might. Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, given the update that you're going to give about the school budget and how they're going to meet soon and vote on our recommendation, that might put some ideas to rest. So
Yeah, I hope so. I just, you know, I know I heard talk of a supplement, and I don't know how many people read the supplements, and I just worry that there's some energy that will have not realized that they actually got what they were hoping for, but we'll figure that out when the time comes, I suppose.
okay. All right, so back to the list of articles. So I have Caitlin, you are on the last disbursement of electric light department receipts, and then building department revolving fund, that's Tina. And the Department of Elder Services revolving fund, Brenda. Transfer funds to the reserve fund, that's Bob.
No surprises there, Sue?
I'm still
We haven't
working
voted
on
that
it.
yet, so I don't know what the number is.
I'm still working on it too. So
Okay,
I don't think it's going to be a huge amount because we haven't used the reserve fund at all this year. But we got a lot of big departments that are in a deficit. So
okay. All right, thanks.
you're welcome.
And I'm gonna speak to when we do that vote on the reserve fund transfer amount later in our meeting. So we'll talk about that more then. Okay, next I have transfer harbor revenues to Municipal Waterways Improvement and Maintenance Fund. That's also Bob. Number 13 is rescind authorized but unissued debt, Tina. Next is Plymouth River School Windows Project, which is Evan. Maybe a question would come up about why we have to revote the funding source, but I think it's pretty well explained in the comment, but just in case. Article, let's see, 15 is transfer borrowed but unspent funds from completed capital projects. That's George. Article 16 is fire department large capital needs, Daveline. You know, we might have questions about if there's a confusion, which I thought you explained pretty well in the comment, but a confusion about whether that's spending money on North Fire Station or something, or why we're spending money on the, I think in some town meeting attendee minds, you know, the fire station was just rebuilt, just, you know, it seems like just yesterday, but it's been a longer time, so.
I think somebody could ask a question why we're redoing work that was done not all that long ago. I mean, I think that could be a fair question. How do we make sure this project is supervised?
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I think that was George's question at one point when we talked about that article, and I think it's a good question. We tried to address that, but in the comment, but.
Okay. Anyone else think of any good question for Daveline? Okay. Next, we have Community Preservation Committee, which is the group of 4 of you, Nancy, Kristen, Dave, and Evan. So the big question about that article, I would imagine, is about the pool. And that article is been placed on the warrant before the pool project itself. I did ask, is there any way we can change the order on that? Is it too late? And apparently no, but I am going to talk to the moderator about, hold on. Dogs, sorry, someone came in the door. Talk to the moderator about how, just to make sure that he understands that there's going to be a lot of talk about the pool at the town meeting, I'm sure, and whether it would open up during the CPC article, or if he can hold chatter about the pool project itself to the next article. I'm not sure. But we should know by before town meeting, obviously. Anyone have anything about the CPC articles, the CPC projects article?
I agree with you, Julie, that it's the pool is going to be the issue and it's likely to come up twice. And I think with the CPC, it's only a majority vote as opposed to the later article, which is going to be a 2/3 vote. So the CPC article may be viewed as a bellwether for what's going to come later on.
And I think you're just gonna have to be able to answer what happens to that 500,000 if the pool doesn't pass.
Right. And Dave wrote that in the comment, but just in case, Dave will be ready to get up and
Say it again.
pop up and give that answer again. Right, Dave?
Yeah, of course. I do think it's probably a good idea to see if Puzo would say that to avoid, I mean, because the thought that we're going to go through 2 rounds of 6 minutes on the pool back to back is nuts, right? So we should, I'd like to think that somehow the moderator could, he won't like this idea, but it's so frustrating that they're in this order because it seems a little nuts. But the message would be, I don't know. I mean, it's to Tina's point, the money doesn't go anywhere. It stays in CPC. So if you want to, it would be, oh God, let's just hope it doesn't create a fuss for this one on CPC. Let's pick our battles and fight on 19 or 18, not 17. But yes, Tina, I can obviously make that comment and maybe it won't get held. So then we'll just move along. But
All right, I will discuss that with the moderator. Dave, that's a good point. Maybe he can just sort of come out and say that. Preemptively. Okay. So next up is the South Shore Country Club. Well, it is the town pool at the South Shore Country Club article. So Dave is also going to speak on that. Thank you, Dave.
there won't be any questions. I'm not worried about that one.
I know that there is already discussion underway about making sure, having the moderator make sure that the scope is followed. The scope of the article is just for this outdoor seasonal pool. And the scope of the article before town meeting is not the bubble. And so there are ways that the conversation can be directed so that it just questions that are allowed and will be about questions about the seasonal pool.
The question I can see you getting is, will the group have to come back to town meeting in future years to get the bubble? And I just can't remember what the answer was to that. I know we talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a comment that let's see, I should remember this off the top of my head, but I don't. But it's
in the budget context.
Yeah, so you'd have to come back to town meeting if about the budget part of it. But the pool, the bubble itself could come back before town meeting if the funds for the bubble itself were going to be a request to town meeting and not something that was like private fundraising. And then, of course, any permitting is done through the planning board, and they would review, the planning to review the project that's being presented to town meeting this year, but they would also review what would be changed in the future by putting a bubble on that.
And I think too that my comment will likely, Matt, speak to that, you know, in the context of, you know, if you were to ascribe merit to the argument that this thing would run $250,000 deficit as a year-round pool, I don't have to tell anybody on this call that $250,000 red ink in the country club will not go unnoticed in a budget context. So there's ample opportunity for the town to get a look at that before it takes place. I would submit. I mean, people may disagree, but that's certainly how I would look at it. And if anybody in this group feels otherwise, you know, tell me or reach me offline in terms of my own comment, because that's you know, I don't look at this. I look at this as a very distinct request, as Julie just said, and that's the way I would intend to frame it from a comment standpoint.
Well, I think the bubble opponents will object to the $700,000 to make it bubble ready. And that's the way they would probably frame the issue in terms of trying to defeat the bubble down the road. I mean, I think we all voted unanimously for this. I think it makes perfect sense to make it bubble ready. And I think, quite frankly, I think it makes perfect sense to make it a full season bathhouse, even if no bubble is ever built. So I think that's where they're going to come from, Dave, and I think it's going to be the neighbors, the Delpret folks that are going to be speaking about this.
Couldn't they propose to decrease the allowable amount by 700? I mean, the way that it's written, it's like spend up to 8 million. So it doesn't matter if less is spent, but they could propose that we're only allowed to spend 7.3 million. Can they do that?
I think they could.
Well, I wonder though about that, Bob, because it's not, I think at some point you start to get into the question of whether it's not within the scope. I mean, the scope of what's before the town is that bathhouse. It's not a pool that might or might not have a bathhouse, right? So, I mean, to the extent that you start to suggest that you start lobbying for a vote on something other than what's before us, I guess I would wonder if at what point it crosses the line into outside the scope.
I think someone could make a motion to amend, however. The budget.
Could someone make a motion to amend to have a pool that just looks like last year's pool? I mean,
I think
previous pool with no bathhouse?
I think they could make a motion to amend to decrease the funding amount by $700,000.
I know, but you're kind of avoiding my question, which is that if you decrease the funding amount, you're de facto changing the project. Right? I mean, wouldn't that be the intent of decreasing the funding?
You know, I think it's a debatable point that the moderator will maybe lose some sleep over.
Well, it might be something, Julie. I hadn't thought about that, Tina. It's an interesting angle, but you might just give Puzo a heads up of, you know, I don't know where it's going to come from, but that's an interesting idea.
And I was talking about that 700,000 or 800,000 was actually the foundation to make the structure bubble ready. I wasn't even talking about the bathhouse.
I mean,
That was the figure that Alan quoted that is built, I thought, I could be wrong, but built into the project to make the structure able to support a bubble in the future.
well, and to make the
time.
bathhouse 12-month bathhouse.
Okay.
But it's kind of like Carlos De Silva's motion last year about the public safety facility being, compliant with energy action standards. And his motion ultimately was not adopted by the town meeting, but it was presented to the town meeting.
Well, and along those lines, we saw a little preview of this movie in the CPC hearings where Larry basically tried to redo the project within the context of CPC's funding. And needless to say, the Country Club wasn't amenable to that modification and suggested that they were putting forth what all of their reasoned work had suggested was the right project. And so it would be, I think that might be, I like I said, you're right, Bob. I don't know how that impacts moderator's view, but it's a question he might want to think about ahead of time. Because,
It's a thorny question, I think, for the moderator.
yeah, and there's a slim chance. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You want to finish your sentence, Dave, and then Andy can go?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, Andy?
I assume we do not know even an estimate of what it would cost to add the bubble, correct?
We do. It's in that comment. I'm trying to pull it up because I don't remember off the top of my head what was written in the comment. Let's see.
I didn't see it in the comment.
All right, hold on, I'm getting closer. The cost of including a bubble-ready infrastructure. Yeah, so that's bubble-ready infrastructure is approximately $700,000 of the construction cost total. This does
Right,
not-
now my question is what?
Oh, I know, yeah. Well, I think that was quoted that the bubble itself cost, didn't it? Someone here at one point, $500,000.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, I thought it was mid six figures. Yep.
And so assuming it's mid six figures, it would come up in a subsequent budget as an item, a separate article for appropriation or borrowing. Is that correct?
That's a possibility, although there is the possibility in the future that the town, the South Shore Country Club, the town, whoever could do fundraising or have a donor who wanted to give money for that. It's not set in stone that this has to be a future vote, a future appropriation of town meeting to purchase that bubble.
So if the question is, will town meeting get a chance to vote on converting the outdoor pool to a four-season pool? The answer is yes, unless there is private funding found to convert it.
Can I
there's-
offer a thought on that?
I mean, I
It's-
have it and I have written in the comment that if in the future, if the town wishes to convert to a year-round operation, then it may be subject to further permitting to the extent applicable, and any additional appropriation requests to support such an operation would be subject to a town meeting budget vote. And also any additional appropriation requests to purchase the bubble would be subject to a town meeting vote other than private fundraising.
Okay, but so then my response was accurate then. Right, unless there are private funds made available in the future, then it will come before town meeting as a form of an article for appropriation of borrowing, right?
For the bubble itself, yes.
But for the utilities and for the staffing, that would be part of a budget request for the recreation department, and that would be significant. That will show up on the budget as a new thing.
Well, it might be under recreation, it might be under the country club enterprise fund. I don't know. They don't have an answer for that right now. But Bob?
Yeah, I was basically going to say that a lot of the commentary about a possible future bubble relates to the operational cost and whether it will put the country club or rec in a deficit spending position. And I think because of that, unless there are private funds, not only for the construction of the bubble, but for its maintenance and operation well into the future, there would very much need to be budgetary review at a town meeting.
Okay, I just think that point has to be made clear that that it's highly likely and it will come before a town meeting almost certainly because of the operating expenses, even beyond the construction expenses. The anticipated operating expenses, although we have no idea what they might be. Is that
Right.
correct?
We don't know.
I mean,
if they are.
Huh? I mean, I think it's going to come up before another town meeting, and if I would like us to be able to say that as certainly as we can while remaining 100% accurate.
And yeah, I mean, my sense is, unless somebody objects, in the comment or in my remarks, I intend to say that, you know, to the extent that there is any budgetary impact on the town or any abutter impact, you know, town meeting or town boards will have another opportunity to vet those changes. I think that's the bottom line. So if this was underwritten, someone stroked a big check and said, here's the bubble and the deficits for as far as the eye can see, I guess it's conceivable that wouldn't get back to the town. But I don't see anybody objecting under those circumstances either, provided it went through the planning board for the abutters, et cetera, et cetera. So I hear you, Andy. Your point's the right one, and I intend to make it as clearly as I can that I think it's a red herring to suggest that approval on April 30th could result in a bubble showing up one night, and all of a sudden we have to deal with the expense and the vista.
Yeah, yeah, and I just caution about putting too much emphasis on the planning board aspect of it, because that's not going to be satisfactory to the opponents who want this to be you have to vote against it now or you'll never get another chance to vote against it.
And I think, Andy, the opponents, from at least when they were here before us, I think their concern is there will be private fundraising and there will never be an opportunity. And you're not going to, you're not going to condense them anyway, no matter how many times we say boards will have to review. And if it's a budgetary, all of that. I mean, that I think they think somebody's going to come up and write a check, apparently.
No, I understand. But the point is you don't want the opponents to be able to get up and say, you should vote this down again tonight, because there's no guarantee you'll ever get another chance to vote against a year-round pool. And that's, I agree, is not an accurate statement, and we have to make sure that we articulate why it is not. That's
noted. Andy, I agree 100%. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
George?
Yeah, I think what Dave just said, on top of Andy's comments is really all I was going to say. I think we just have to be careful. We can't make promises for what future town meetings might be asked to vote on, because there is so much that is unknown about the future. I think the way you wrote it in the comment, Julie, is certainly appropriate, and I think Dave has a good handle on how best to present, to frame the response to whatever questions come up. So,
Okay, thanks. Anyone have anything else to add about the pool? Well, I don't think we need to take bets on that, the article that's going to be discussed the most at town meeting. So anyway, next up is the South Shore Country Club maintenance facility. And that was Matt's article, but Matt, I talked to Al today and he is fine to take that article for you in case there are any questions that come up.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone have any question to add or think of about the maintenance facility other than the obvious, why are we spending more money on this project? It's explained in the comment. Okay. Next up, we have the Article 20, modify size of long-range waste disposal and recycling committee, just Tina. Then we have the two articles concerning the Weir River water system. First is appropriation of bond premium and excess bond proceeds. That's Kristen. And the next one is the authorization to borrow for water capital improvements, which is Caitlin. And I guess what I would say is that if there's somebody who is still cross with the town for buying the water company in the first place, you might get some questions about that. I was at Linden Ponds last night for a warrant review, and somebody brought that up. They said, oh, the water company, and it was an old opponent of the acquisition. And I said, no, these are good articles. Look, they're reinvesting in the system and doing all the things that the town said that they were going to do when they bought the water company. But I was like, oh.
This is money going to improve the water system as opposed to improving the money that their Aquarian is making.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Julie, do you think we'll get a question on the water commissioners and whether those will become elected at some point, or?
Michael
Not in the
Mullally's
scope.
question.
Yeah, it's not in the scope. It's not a warrant article.
Talking points on the water company, it might be a great opportunity to talk about what a phenomenal change it has made and how much more capital investment we're getting in. I'm sure.
26 new fire hydrants.
What's that?
All right, and the last number I heard, it might be higher now, 26 new fire hydrants that were defunct and replaced.
I can't hear you. Will you lean into the mic?
I said 20, the last number I heard, I thought it was 26 new fire hydrants that were defunct that have been replaced.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if it comes up in your article, Kristen, or your article, Caitlin, just if you can maybe sort of brush up on when we went through the water system budget itself, the Superintendent Russell Tierney went through some information about, how the system has been improved so much since the town purchased it. And I mean, in a pinch, we could fall back on the liaisons who worked during the acquisition itself, which is Dave. Sorry. Bob, were you on that team?
Yes.
We get Erin to come back to do it.
Yeah. No, she's going to be in the cheap seats, remember?
Lucky.
So if it becomes a thing.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't become a thing, but sure. I mean, we could speak to it, I think. And yeah, I mean, if push comes to shove, hopefully Michael won't let it go that way.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a no questions article.
I don't know. I heard it.
We'll
We all
To
worn
God's
out by
ears,
the
Bob.
pool. That's
You just
Right, I
jinxed
know,
it.
that's
They'll
true.
be done with
Everyone's
water.
Everyone's gonna pack
all
up and
water.
leave, or
It's
they're
all
gonna
water.
use the restrooms or something. I don't know. Okay.
Can we start the
So those are
Adjourn
the-
lottery?
I'm gonna discuss that in the meeting, Bob, tonight. It's like absolute agenda item about the the wager. Okay, so next up we have Article 23, which is the Foster School Funds for Pre-Construction Costs. And that's Al. And you know, I guess we'll find out at the moderators meeting. I'm assuming that the Foster School Building Committee will be the first to get up, and you know, this is the entree into what's going to happen this fall. So I think that they should come out and start talking about this project. That's my personal opinion, and I'll mention that. Anyone have anything to add? Okay. And then after that is the Public Safety Facility Funds for Pre-Construction Costs. Nancy.
Julie, I had a question. Do we know, I know I saw an email come out from the town about the tours of the public. Are people signing up for that?
Yeah, they have had attendees. I wouldn't say it was 20 people per tour. It was maybe more like 6 to 8 to 10 people a tour, but they have had people attend the tours.
Can you remind me, was Foster on that, or was it just the public safety buildings?
It was the current police station and the current North Fire Station. So no, there, to my knowledge, have not been tours of Foster. Does anyone know otherwise?
That was, Caitlin, those were organized by the chiefs.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And did I hear from you, Nancy, that at least one involved but originally opposed citizen had changed her mind dramatically after being on a tour?
That would be overstated. I think there were on the fence people who were shocked and appalled who came in. The strong anti-person didn't come, so we shall see.
Well, I think it's good to have offered those tours and give the opportunity before the special town meeting to do the same for anyone who would want to take that kind of tour. And the same with Foster, but I'm not sure what the plan is for that.
I think that they should definitely do them, but it might be restricted because of the kids are still in session.
Right, kids are still in school, so. Does anyone have any questions about or thoughts about questions that could come up about the public safety facility construction costs? Okay, so next up on the list is Article 25, which is reduction of speed limits, which is Daveline.
Yep, if there are questions, I'm ready.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, we have transfer care, custody, and control of a portion of transfer station site to Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant, and that's Brenda.
All the public questions at the two meetings were about, is this really needed? Do we have so many other big money projects? So I think the most important comment is gonna come, the light plant is having their consultant sort of analyze their financial situation to see how much they have funds that will reduce the amount of debt to the rate holders. And I'm going to find out at the next meeting before town meeting whether one of the light plant board members wants to present that or whether they want me to present it. But that's the information we've been waiting for.
That's great. Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, Brenda, I was just curious, has there been any environmental concern about taking a chunk out of, conservation land for this? Has that come up in any of the meetings, or is there any? It's coming out of transfer
station land.
Well, I know it's coming out of transfer station land, but it looks like conservation land out of Moore Brewer. I'm just wondering if anybody argued that was like, how can you take conservation?
The neighbors that were concerned last year were not concerned about that. And the way they created the map, which I guess if there are questions, it'll show, is that this location is X number of feet away from the wetlands down below, and is in fact already transfer station land. It's just unused transfer station land. So
Okay, great. So no, yeah, I just wonder if there was a sleeper concern about that, but that's great.
No, is it really needed? Because we already have too many things we're spending money on were the questions.
So
And,
hopefully people will remember last week.
yeah, the power outage.
was just gonna
When
say
one line
that.
into town goes down, this is what happens. Yes. Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened last week. I asked the town
That is what
administrator,
happened.
hey, why we lose power last Wednesday? And he said, well, the line went down, but it went down in Weymouth. So it has to feed from Weymouth into Hingham. So that line went down. You only have one line into town. That's what happens.
We sure that was an accident? Timing was impeccable.
I know.
I mean, we still give the light plant a lot of credit for, taking the one line that was still operational to backfeed everything so that people weren't out for all that long. But if two lines go down from those same poles, that won't be the case, right? So that's the point.
20 minutes. That was
That's pretty impressive.
impressive. Okay, anyone have any other potential questions about the HMLP article? Okay. Next, we have up the high school tennis court rehabilitation, which is George.
I watched the, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead.
I watched the school committee meeting, the last school committee meeting, and there was some debate as to whether they were gonna end up. Does that, I know it doesn't change the article, but would it be pertinent in the conversation? Would it be something that people would be concerned about?
So I'll give
Was
you a
it-
sneak preview of Dave's liaison update, which is that the school committee plans to take a vote in the last week of April before town meeting. And part of the vote involves voting budget, and the other part is to make a decision about whether the school committee, which they seem inclined to do so, is to add money towards that project from the athletic fee revolving fund. And so the article itself doesn't change because it just says available funds in the recommended motion. And it also, in George's comment, which George, maybe you didn't think about, but it was a brilliant idea at the time, not to be very specific about where the available funds were, because that's going to change. It wouldn't be all unassigned fund balance. And then the school committee is going to write a supplement to the warrant that will explain that budget vote and the fact that they would, if they vote this and approve this, that they would put revolving fund money and how much towards that project. So, it could come up as a question, but the school committee will have a supplement to town meeting that will explain that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And
I
Julie,
understand the
Julie, just
process.
to-
I'm more concerned about the kerfuffle.
Julie, just to your point, I knew that this was going to turn around all along, and so I planned it that way. So,
George, if you can see into the future, then I've got some questions for you, a lot of questions about town meeting and otherwise.
all right.
Yeah, that was good. I looked back at that article back up in a panic, like, oh my God, we have to change the article, but no, stand the test of time. So that's good. Anyone have any other questions about the tennis courts?
I have a question, but it's not about the tennis courts. I was under the impression, and I don't remember why, that it was really difficult to put a supplement into the warrant. And there was like restrictions around doing that. So is the school committee have already covered the fact that they're allowed to do that?
Yep, they've already been in touch with the town administrator's office, and they're expecting that information, and that would be sent to town hall for printing. It would be a single sheet of paper that would be handed out at town meeting when people will check in. And so the production of, printing of that for town meeting, that's going to happen in the days before town meeting. So
That's a supplemental report, right? Type thing.
yeah, it's a supplement to the school committee's report that went, that's already in the warrant.
Okay, thank you.
So people know about it. They're prepared to do the printing. So. Okay, next up, we have the 5-year lease for special education school transportation vehicles. That's Daveline. I got a question last night, which is sort of not really in the scope, but I got a question at Linden Ponds last night about electric school buses and when we were going to switch over to electric fleet as a town. And I said, well, it's not advisory committee before advisory committee right now. I don't know what the plan is, but just in case that could possibly come up, Daveline, but.
So I know that John Ferris has said to Capital Outlay, when he was looking at the special ed beds and also looking at school buses in general, that he has been trying to figure out a way in which to get grant money that might electrify the fleet or work towards that. So
Okay.
They have, I think, looked at it. And there was something in the last few days, there's been something big on news about a community maybe in California that was electrifying school buses. So it's been in the news in a way that it wouldn't surprise me. And Linden Ponds has a very active climate justice group. So
yeah. Wasn't it somewhere in the news about Boston maybe doing that?
Boston just spent $7
was.
million for a very low number of buses. It was like in the 20s.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but
Andy?
I will pay
Sorry, go
particular
ahead.
attention to a question around that.
Okay, just in case. Andy?
Yeah, in the haze of my memory, there was something in the school budget about buying a couple of vans, special ed vans, I thought. Does that impact this article or interact?
I think this is the permission to lease them for 5 years because you can't have under state law more than a 3-year lease unless town meeting approves it.
Okay.
I think there is a question, Andy, about it appears that both in the capital outlay budget and in the school's operating budget, there was listings about these vans. And so I think my takeaway for next year is to make sure in capital outlay that when the school budget comes out, which is always way after capital outlay has been, that we check and make sure there's no double putting things in. And I don't know if that was the numbers didn't really match up. So I don't know if that was the cost, if that was some other cost of operating the special ed vans.
Dave, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can't, Andy, you're right. You have a good memory on this. There were 2 new sped vans included in the additional requests at about $26,000. And when I asked if that, I won't bore you with the email thread that was extensive about what exactly that meant. But there were also 2 new van drivers. And so I think these are in addition to what Dave Lane's referring to in terms of capital outlay. That was my understanding. There were some routes that they had outsourced and they wanted to insource because John penciled it out and thought they were saving money by insourcing these routes instead of outsourcing them, to which I then said, well, why are we making an additional request if this is going to save money that's budgeted for outsourcing? And after that, my long thread ensued, which never got a satisfactory response.
Well,
But,
yeah. And
so-
I'll just say, Dave, the initial capital outlay request was for $100 and some $1,000 for this, that I learned in one of our meetings that it was down to 60, which I let capital outlay know. So the numbers always seem to be.
It's very slippery. Yeah.
Yeah, slippery is a
I
good
mean,
word. I was gonna say they're floating out there somewhere.
Well, no, and I will say this, because the one area that I did press a little bit further was just to help understand what the delta was between the outsourcing and the insourcing. And John is good about that kind of stuff. And he demonstrated to me the cost of 2 routes outsourced and the cost of 2 routes insourced with this. And yeah, it was a savings. So I see where he's going with it.
And at the end of it, we will own these two vans that we're leasing for 5 years, we will own at the end. Whereas
Right.
with the buses, when we lease them for 5 years, we have a right to buy them.
Right.
but
This
we
is a
don't
lease to
just own them.
own.
These we will just own. So,
Yeah. So Andy, you're right. I mean, and at the end of the day, again, a little bit of a preview of where I'll go with ACES. Obviously, we didn't authorize the additional request for these vans, nor the drivers, we didn't put that forward in our recommended budget. So that schools are considering using some of their other funding for these vans. I don't
but
know
capital
how they're
outlay
going.
did fund the vans.
Okay, and
I mean, they
okay,
don't have to use it on that, but that's.
Right. Gotcha. So, yeah.
So this essentially says if the school committee has the money, the town authorizes them to expend that for lease for more than 3 years, i.e. a 5-year lease.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're really two different questions, Andy. You're right, and you're right to be confused.
This doesn't pertain to this particular article, but it potentially pertains to any article. And it's the question of inflation. And I think questions about inflation could be raised concerning any article that we all collectively should be prepared to address. It's my understanding that our collective bargaining agreements are not tied to any kind of COLA arrangements, so that our personnel costs, at least for FY23, are highly predictable and fixed, but not necessarily our expense costs. Although it does seem to me that folks like John Ferris and Randy have been very good at tying in contracts to fixed prices, but maybe Sue, you could speak to that?
All I know is we talked to Michelle and Tom about that. I mean, if anybody goes over a budget, it like fuel, we have no idea what the fuel will be next year. Those are going to be just reserve fund transfers.
Okay, but we're seeing numbers like, 8% in terms of some inflationary costs in the newspapers. That could translate into a large number in terms of a reserve fund transfer. Are there things we can say to the folks at the town meeting to indicate to them that this is at least being managed as best we are able to do?
I think that's all you can say, Bob.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Okay, so next on the list is the zoning bylaws. So number one, we have gender neutral and other term revisions, which is Andy.
Correct.
And then we have the residential accessory uses, which is Sarah. And then the special permits and site plan review procedures, that was Matt's article, but Andy is going to have that article, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, the caboose article. Every year it's at the end. I'm not really sure why they decided to just tack it on the end, but it's acceptance of easements. And that's Sarah. So in case there's any hard.
Remember, there is that one guy who sometimes asks a
That's
question.
good to know. I had no idea it was right at the end, actually.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So,
And isn't there somebody who's I think I remember several years who just asked a question about.
That
yes,
one's
I think
awesome.
there is somebody in town who has been bothered by that in the past.
Okay. Well,
I would do, Sarah, I would go back to the town meeting recordings that Harbor Media does from
And
like the
see.
last couple of years, and it's the
Right.
last article, and you
Right.
just see if that
See
if
what the
anything-
question was.
Yeah, if
Fair
over
enough.
the past 5 years or whatever,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
just in case.
Yeah. By then everyone just wants to go home, so I'll try to
Well, I
keep the
know,
answers
right?
very short.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. I did kind of skip over the zoning articles question of whether you think that there would be any questions coming up, and I apologize. I think that maybe the questions would come up under the special permits and site plan review for maybe acknowledgement of including the provisions of tree preservation, or, you know, what do y'all think?
I think there'll be issues with the residential accessory uses as well, just because that's been kicked around in various formats, even though this one is different than the ones we've seen before. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the residential accessory uses here, of course, is simply to set forth expressly the criteria. It's not
Right,
about
it's not like it's
people
just
Right,
moving
but
in.
how a
But
judgment would
if
be
you only
made.
pay
It's not-
attention at once a year town meeting, you might
Yeah.
have that explained to you.
Okay, that then you just have to be clear, Sarah, that this is not the accessory dwelling use article.
Right,
That's the problem. And the special, if there are questions on the changes in the bylaws, I'm tempted to let either Susan Murphy or Emily Wentworth address that first. Because they drafted these original proposals.
So Susan is a resident of the town. She could speak, but I don't know about Emily. So.
Okay, well, so then Susan would,
Yeah.
unless anybody thinks that would be inappropriate, but I think, you know, Susan is quite conversant with this, and
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I mean,
and,
I'm happy to say anything further that has to be said or to address the trees, but you know,
okay.
so I'm going to suggest at the moderators meeting that would be appropriate for her to essentially speak on behalf of the planning board, I suppose, would be.
And
But-
just a note that if there's somebody who doesn't live in the town and we want to hear from them, town meeting can take a vote to authorize that person to get up and speak to town meeting. So.
Okay, good.
So
Sue's like, yeah, right. Sue will be busy with her
I was
laptop
afraid
in
of my
front of her. And then, well, Priya Howell may want to get up and speak to that, the special permits article, just to point out or make a statement or say something about the tree preservation provisions, of course.
For sure.
Okay. All right. So that's good brainstorming. Thank you all. And if you come up with any other questions in the next couple weeks, just email them to me and then I'll send them out to the liaisons, or you can put the liaison in an email. But if you forget who the liaison is, then just send them to me and I'll send it out. But okay, so that is the part about the warrant articles. And the next part is just, I'd like to run through the budget categories and just make sure that everybody remembers what budgets they had. It seems like so long ago that we covered the budgets. But one question out of the gate that I think is, I think could easily happen is that when you look at the in the municipal budgets, everything but the schools, you'll see in some areas large increase from last year to this year, and that has to do in salaries. So I think that just again, I can write this up and send it out to everybody, just sort of a general statement that just reminds town meeting about the fact that there are new that there's new collective bargaining agreements in place, and that there were salary adjustments, and then also the wage and classification study that happened and impacted the budgets for the non-union employees. So I think that could easily be a question that comes up where people don't read the very long report at the beginning from the advisory committee, which explains all of that. Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just gonna say, is it appropriate that the personnel board would get, because it's across so many departments and feels to the uninitiated dramatic, is it appropriate that they would speak to it?
I don't know. I mean, you can look at it as, do you want to point that out and make a big deal about it? Or do you only want to make a big deal about it unless someone has a question or someone individually wants to make a big deal about it?
Well, okay, regardless of when it comes, whether or not you proactively address it, should the first person to address it?
Oh,
It's probably worth a short paragraph in your comments, Julie, on the overall budget,
okay.
just to diffuse the issue.
It's hard not to notice.
Yeah,
The-
okay, that's a good suggestion.
You know, the personnel board's report is Article 4. So if there's going to be a question on that, it would have come up then. But I agree with Bob that they say what, you know, the percentage increases are in their, who does Article 4, who did the comment? Kristen, so,
Kristen,
but I agree with Bob that adding a paragraph in your opening statement, Julie, would be a good idea. And then,
yeah, but I thought that, wasn't it last year that the comment covered that? Or did the comment this year also discuss the new contracts and the wage and classification study?
this year, it doesn't specifically, it does mention both.
Okay,
I know in our conversation with Chief Murphy on the budget, he fully expected that somebody would hold the fire department budget. I don't know if other people from that subcommittee remember him saying that.
I was gonna mention that, David.
And that would ask.
all right.
And then
Well-
is that appropriate? Is that something that we are required to respond to? Again, it would almost feel more appropriate for the personnel board to respond to that.
I think an advisory committee's job was to study the budget and explain the budget to town meeting and present the budget to town meeting that we think should be voted on. So I think that in this case, I mean, I'll ask about the personnel board, but I just think that it's something that the advisory committee can explain.
Yeah.
and
And I think
what-
like in the fire, we were clearly way behind in terms of salaries for the fire.
I was just gonna say that, David Lee.
Yeah, and we were therefore having trouble hiring people. So I mean, I think it's,
Yeah.
so I don't think that's the personnel committee in one sense. I think that we're fully capable of
Yeah.
giving that response.
And
And there was discussion about it in last year's warrant also.
Yeah,
about-
okay.
About the study and the impact of it, so.
Well, I will get out ahead of it if at all possible. If people come to town meeting on time, then they will hear in my 6-minute speech, I will add the information about try to get ahead of that. Otherwise, then we'll deal with it again within Article 6 if we need to. Brenda, you had something? You've been
The other
patient. Sorry.
proactive, I think, comment would be explaining how the fuel costs have been estimated and increased, because everybody will be thinking fuel cost increases, and to have at least to know that we put it in as best we can at this point. But
Okay. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to run through the budget categories quickly, just so everyone understands what they're covering in case any questions or any holds happen. So I have, for select board, I have Andy,
Correct?
human resources, Human Resources, Brenda. Reserve Fund, Andy. Town Accountant, Andy. Information Technology, Caitlin. Assessors, Caitlin. Treasurer Collector, Caitlin. Legal Services, Andy. Town Meetings, Brenda. Town Clerk, Sarah. Elections, Sarah. Conservation Commission, Sarah. Community Planning, Caitlin. Land Use and Development, Brenda. Bear Cove Park, Sarah. Town Hall, Brenda. Grand Army Memorial Hall, Kristen. Then in Public Safety, I have the Police Department, Nancy. Fire Department, Tina. Dispatch Services, Daveline. Building Commissioner, Daveline. Animal Control, Daveline. Harbor Master, Daveline. Public Safety Utilities, Daveline. Then we have the education budget. So we would want to have Dave, and then George, you could be backup necessary. Does that sound okay?
Yep. Can't imagine I would have to back up Dave, though. I mean.
Well, I mean, just saying
Let's,
like.
let's take all
do
12
like a-
minutes, George. Come on, you can do it.
You guys want to do like a 1-2 punch, like, yeah, and what he said.
One
I
sentence
don't know.
each, exactly, alternating.
Okay. All right.
Everything he
Okay,
said,
in
I agree with that.
Right. You guys have such gravitas. She'll get up and be like, what do you mean you got a question? Come on. Just kidding. All right. So Public Works, DPW, Highway, Tree and Park, I have Tina.
Mhm.
Landfill Recycling, Brenda. Sewer Commission, George. Then Human Services, Health Department, Brenda. Elder Services, Daveline. Veteran Services, Kristen. Health Imperatives, Kristen. And South Shore Resource and Advocacy Center, Kristen. Then in Culture and Recreation, Library, Andy. Recreation Commission, Bob. Trustees of Bathing Beach, Kristen. Historical Commission, Bob. Celebrations, Kristen. So then we have the South Shore Country Club Enterprise Fund. That was one of Matt's budgets. And so I put, Al is going to cover that budget. Then Weir River Water System, Evan. And then we get into all of the debt service, Bob. And then the employee benefits, I have group insurance, Al. OPEB, Kristen. Contributory retirement, Kristen. Workers' compensation, Bob. Unemployment, Bob. Mandatory Medicare, Al. And then I have general insurance, Bob. I think that's it. Did I forget anything?
Unclassified and property and liability insurance.
Right, so I think Bob is under property and liability insurance, but.
Unclassified is 0, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
With regard to the select board's budget, are the advisory committee members who opposed adding the sustainability coordinator position intending to speak to that at town meeting?
I'm not.
Yeah, I think so. And that is being covered by a transfer from fund balance, correct?
Well, I mean, a lot of the budget is from fund
Right.
balance.
But
So,
to go from where we were to add an additional 48,000 expenses, we had recommended previously a balanced budget. So if we add expense, we have to add the funding source, and so that would be an addition to the monies from fund balance, correct?
yes.
Okay.
You know, so we had people who wanted to be recorded and could speak if they wanted to.
But they're not going to.
Well,
Dave
only
just-
Dave said, only
Dave
Dave
just
said
said-
no.
I guess I've never been. I haven't been before, so if there's questions, I will say why I voted against it, but I don't need to get up and speak to it unless you think that that's needed, Andy.
No, nope.
And I'm not, yeah, I mean, it's a simple thing. It's you know, revenues don't cover our expenses, and I don't think we should be doing anything above and beyond what was in the budget. So to me, it's a simple answer.
Yeah, so
I just want to know whether I should anticipate something by saying, you know, the misguided sense of principle of the dissenters. Well, I
No, you
won't
should
say.
not say that.
It's a good question though, Andy. You should be prepared for that
Yeah.
answer. Yeah.
of course. And then the elections budget is the voting pad, poll pad. So that's Sarah, right?
Yeah, iPad. Yeah, I won't call it that.
Yeah.
I'll call it a poll pad, but it's an
Okay,
iPad
well,
with
iPad.
with election
yeah.
software. But we
And it's
can't
for
have
the new
another
precinct.
precinct without it. So
Right.
it is what
So
it
you,
is.
if
Yeah.
someone gets up and says, what is this crazy additional
Right.
expense, or, you know, and someone from AdCom wants to say why they voted against it, that's fine, but you could get up and say, well, this is why
Yeah,
we thought this was a good
Without
ad,
it.
so.
the extra precinct would have sort of quill and ink vote. Yeah,
Isn't it just software, additional software?
it's bit, yes, on an iPad, but the real cost is, the main cost is the software on that.
Bob?
Last year for Article 6, we made a specific recommendation of a one-time appropriation and transfer of fund balance in a specific amount, almost $5 million. Is that, I haven't tried to pull up this year's Article 6 recommendation while looking at the screen with all of your faces, but did we increase did we use that kind of formula for Article 6 recommendation this year? And did we increase it by the amounts necessary for the two ads?
We did.
Okay, great, perfect. I think that really kind of settles the question.
Yeah, I mean, we did in the comment,
Is,
in the actual text of Article 6.
but
I'm
in the
looking at it right
recommended
now.
motion, in the
Yeah,
recommended
it's in the
motion.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, thanks.
okay. Okay, so that is the budgets. I don't want anyone to lose any sleep and be scared about any questions that come up. It's just good to be prepared going into town meeting, and that in that case, then no one will ask any questions. Just kidding, but just in case.
There's no cemetery warrant article this time, so.
I do.
Well, you never, every year, there's the sleeper article that we don't know, like all of a sudden it blows up, like, what do you mean there's this problem?
What was that
Tina, you had a
portico?
question?
Do you remember the
Yeah,
portico?
the gazebo.
The gazebo.
The gazebo.
Stolen,
The stolen gazebo.
purloined, I believe was the word used at town meeting.
I'm stating the obvious, and and it's written clearly in the comments or in the report, but I do think we're going to have to be prepared to address why we are using fund balance again to balance the budget. I realize I'm stating the obvious. but I
No, that also has to be part of my welcome to town meeting speech. You gotta fit into 6 minutes, the story of this year, and that's part of the story of this year. So I'll try.
It's our rainy day fund and it's been raining. That's-
That's nicely put. Bob?
Can I offer a few comments on what I kind of see as the changes in budgetary and economic philosophy within the town? Being classically trained, as Cicero always said, to know your audience. And I think our audience at the town meeting is changing. And I've given some thought to that. And I wondered if it would be useful to have a discussion in the context of the budget of where folks are coming from and what implications that has for next fall, George. Or I'd be happy to defer that kind of discussion to a later meeting.
Can I suggest we hear the ACES report first and then have, I would be very happy to hear your thoughts tonight, Bob.
I would defer to the chair because I think it's worth, or maybe we even talk about it under housekeeping, of future discussion that this committee should have about where we see as the tenor of town thinking about our finances.
All right.
Right.
Well, I'd love to hear from you, Bob. Maybe we can do it under housekeeping
Okay.
tonight. Okay, so the third thing on my town meeting prep list is just some basics about town meeting, the day of town meeting itself. So if the weather is clear, then we will have town meeting on Saturday, April 30th at 2 p.m. on the high school athletic fields. We will be sitting in the visitor side of the field bleachers for anyone who hasn't been with us before, or we're in the same place that we were in the last couple of outdoor town meetings. We'll be with the select board, the moderator, the town clerk, Sue will be there, town council. We'll all sit on the bleachers. We will not have a tent to cover us this time. Remember that June town meeting when the sun was beating down on us? We had the tent, except the sun moved and I was outside of the tent for a lot of the meetings. So I just want to complain about my chair, my selection of the bleacher seat, because that was a bad selection. But anyway, hopefully the sun will actually keep us warm because it might be cool air, warm sun. I don't know. But anyway, you should be prepared. Bring a hat or sunglasses. Dress warmly if you need, if needed. Also, please bring a seat cushion or a stadium chair that you can use to keep comfortable because you are sitting on those bleacher seats and they are extremely uncomfortable. So, and then you can bring water and whatever snacks you like to eat. I would just suggest doing that because everybody has different ideas of what snacks that they like, or maybe they get nervous and they don't want to eat. But the town meeting has guidelines have been set by the town administrator's office, and masks are going to be optional. There will be hand sanitizing stations, but the microphone heads will not get switched out after each speaker like we've done in the last couple of open town meetings or outside town meetings. So just an FYI. And then the chairs on the field will be spaced out about 3 feet apart, but they're going to set them closer to the front and not like take them and spread them out across the entire football field. They're going to try to just kind of bring it a little bit closer so it'll feel more accessible to people, hopefully. Harbor Media will record the town meeting. There will be water stations interspersed. Hopefully the weather will be clear and we get through all of the articles that day. If there's inclement weather or we need another day to finish going through the articles, then we would have town meeting on Sunday, May 1st. Same time, 2 p.m. if that weekend, the whole weekend is a rain out, then, or we don't have enough time to finish the articles, then town meeting would be held on Monday, May 9th at 7 PM inside the high school gym, like the old days. I just want to just give a reminder that there are speaking time limits at town meeting. Each person may speak on any subject for 6 minutes for the first time and 3 minutes for the second time. And the moderator has the authority to manage the discussion, including how often a speaker addresses the meeting and how many people speak. And when town meeting finishes, as AdCom usually does, we gather to toast our success. And since it will be late in the afternoon, hopefully on Saturday, the 30th, and who knows what the COVID situation will be in a couple of weeks, but what I did is I arranged patio space for us outside at the Greenside Grill at the South Shore Country Club. So I have a reservation for our group, a special spot on the patio to gather after town meeting is over. So we can have some refreshments and I'll have some appetizers there so we can toast our success. And another AdCom tradition is to place bets on the finish time of town meeting. So we will do that in the time before town meeting starts on Saturday. And so for $5, I think that's what the last time we had used for betting amount. The winner is everyone thinks is incredibly smart to come up with the winner. Nancy raises her hand. But then you can buy a solid drink at the after party. So that's what you get to do.
That money's been burning a hole in your pocket for 2 years.
I know. So whoever wins this year, you got to spend it up at the Greenside Grill. Any questions about that?
Well, there's one caveat that that your time guess has to be exact or under. It cannot be over.
Right. It's Price is Right rules. You can't go over. You're right. Yeah.
I found out.
Okay.
To my dismay. This is not a masked event, correct? The town meeting.
Right. I mean, masks masks this year are optional.
And are we as a committee taking a position on that or individual preference?
I think
Do
it
you
should
want
be
us
up
to
to
wear
individual
masks or you don't
preference.
care? What?
I mean, my quick answer would be just, I think you should wear what you feel comfortable wearing.
Okay.
And personal preference. Does anyone, if anyone thinks otherwise, and they can talk about it right now, or you can send me a note separately, but I think that we should just do whatever.
You
we're
should definitely wear a mask.
In fact, how about a ski mask, Andy?
Yeah, that wouldn't be weird or anything.
I will definitely
Okay.
wear a mask, and probably if numbers keep going up as they have, I'll probably socially distance a little bit as well. So don't be offended. I just,
Yeah, you got to do what you're comfortable doing. So I think that we should support each other and how we want to do that. Any other questions about town meeting details? Okay, so we're gonna have a quick liaison.
Hey,
update
Julie,
from
sorry, one
Dave.
last question. What
Yeah.
time do you want us all to get there? Do you want to say by 1:30? Do you have a preference as to?
Yeah, so I was gonna mention that later, but it's probably better to say
Okay.
it now. I mean, they open up the check-in like an hour before town meeting starts, and I get nervous and antsy and I go kind of early, but you just got to give yourself enough time because you have to check in just like any other voter. So you've got to really give yourself enough time to get in there and then get comfortable in the bleachers and chit chat and make your bet on what time town meeting ends. So I would say, half an hour before at the least, but I'll be there earlier than that. So does that sound okay? But it does, the check-in line. I mean, they're going to have a couple of different access points like they've had in the past, but the check-in line does back up. So hopefully it'll be so well attended that there will be a crowd waiting to get into town. Okay. So we've already kind of talked a little bit about this, but Dave, you want to give us the whole ACES update about what's going on with the schools, please?
Sure. All right. So just where we left this story, there was talk of a $1.7 million positive variance in the FY22 budget. And so at the last school committee meeting, we received an update on that amount. The 1.7 million had basically had two components. One was a component of the federal ESSER funding, which is, we've heard a lot of talk about. There was about $950 million of ESSER funding that was in the 1.7 that the school district does not anticipate using in FY22. The balance of the 1.7, so about another $750,000, is non-ESSER funds, and it was stated at the last meeting that John Ferris expects that the majority, if not all of that money, will be expended according to the budget over the next couple months of FY22. So the bottom line is then that a total amount of ESSER, and just for context, about $423 million of ESSER funding was applied to this year's budget already. So it wasn't
420,000, you mean?
Excuse me, 423,000. Yes, sorry. And that, so there, we went into the year with 1.4 million of ESSER, spent about 423,000 of it, and that leaves us with 953,000 of ESSER. Of that 953, just so you understand how it has to be spent, it has to all be expended by the end of FY24. And then 210,000 of it has to be expended, a minimum of 210,000 has to be expended in FY23. So the ESSER funding will be fully exhausted one way or another by June 30th, 2024. Now, I can't really explain where this came from, but there was some changes then in the conversations that we heard at the same budget meeting coming out of the school committee's finance subcommittee. And one of the changes was a suggestion that some of the ESSER funding, well, let me back up. You'll recall that there was a component of ESSER that was earmarked for the town budget in FY23, about $400,000 of it that the school, I can't explain the details. I wasn't in the meeting, but suffice it to say there was about $400,000 of ESSER funding that was expected to be in the fund balance available for 23. That was not clear that it's still there based on school committee discussions. However, it seems that in an effort to kind of make whole on that, there is a discussion now of using $300,000 of athletic fee revolving funds to offset what was an $850,000 number for the tennis courts at the high schools. So on a net basis, almost the same from a fund balance impact. That again has yet to be voted on, but that is what we heard suggested by the finance committee to the entire school committee, which they will take up, I believe, a week from, well, probably 2 weeks from yesterday, I think is the next meeting.
Yeah, the 25th, April 25th.
The other, I think, important note is that two more important notes. One is that when the budget is prepared every year by John Ferris, and he prepares it early. I mean, we saw the first look at the budget in January. So, and he has a lot of variables that he doesn't know the answer to. And largely it relates to retirements. I don't think the teachers are required to provide a notice of retirement or a notice of a leave of absence or a return from a leave of absence until very late in the school year, which is challenging from a budget perspective. So John takes the appropriate and conservative approach, which is to assume that people are not going to retire and assume that people are going to return from leave. And in other words, take the most expensive situation of most of these variables when presenting a budget to us initially, in the hopes that if there's going to be any surprises, they'll be good surprises and not bad ones. So this happens every year. And this year, as part of this process, as we sit here today, or as we sat here a week ago at the school committee meeting, within the approved amount that AdCom is going to recommend to town meeting, the school department has already found about $360,000 of savings, largely related to retirements that are now official. And those individuals then are replaced by employees at a lower pay on the pay scale. So that it's the delta between a retiring person's salary and a new teacher's salary in that same role. So the good news is that there's $360,000 within the budget that's available for other uses. The suggestion again at the meeting, again, it hasn't been fully voted, was that $360,000 could be applied to a number of the positions that the school committee had sought to fill with the additional requests that ACES did not recommend and that AdCom is not recommending to town meeting. So ultimately, I think that that may be the way that shakes out. We will find out on the 25th. Final point on that then is that there was also discussion at this meeting. For those of you who have not yet read the warrant cover to cover, the school committee report, which appears at the very end of the warrant, interestingly, I will put it that way, talks about the budget that they voted, which is different from the budget that we are recommending. The budget that they discuss in their report is the budget that includes the additional requests, the $850,000 of additional requests. I guess I'm not, well, I'll save the editorializing for the Greenside Grill, but nevertheless, that is in the warrant. And I think the school committee, I heard a number of school committee members suggest, given the positive variance in the budget that's already been discovered, that perhaps the school committee should revisit their budget vote and vote the budget that is the AdCom recommended budget amount to town meeting. That again hasn't happened, and I heard at least two school committee members, three actually, say they thought that was a good idea. So hopefully that is what is going to take place. And as Andy mentioned earlier, if it is to take place and if it is approved that they recommend the same budget amount that AdCom is recommending, that would be referenced in this supplement that will be handed out to people as they walk into town meeting. So I think we can all hope that that is the case. I think that the last piece of good news, I think from a lot of our perspectives and from the perspective of the financial policy, was that I also heard from the chair of the finance subcommittee of the school committee that the intent with the remaining ESSER funds was to use those for one-time expenses, largely, a number of which were related to some of the additional requests. There was some professional development pieces in there. There were some assessment one-time expenses. There were frankly, the sped vans. I think Dave Lee may fall into some of their ESSER funding use. The ESSER is apparently quite broad in its use, which is helpful in times like this, I think was the intent. And this same individual in the school committee meeting, I think said that they wouldn't intend to use ESSER for recurring expenses or positions. So that's what we heard. It will remain to be codified when they hopefully ratify the same budget amount that we do in a couple of weeks. George, anything you want to add to that?
Oh, Dave, I thought you did a great job of summarizing the discussions that they've had. I guess I'm a little troubled by, and you described it perfectly, in that the teachers are not required to tell the administration what their plans are, but it does create a favorable delta in the budget. And it bothers me a little bit that we approve a budget of X dollars, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people retire or whatever, and there's another couple of $100,000 or whatever that becomes available to be spent in a budget. So I don't know how to get around it, but it's just one of these things that if we could get the information on a more timely basis, I think it forms a better budget. But topic for another day, I guess.
Well, it's a good point, and it's one that I've wrestled with too. I will say that, and you can disagree with me because you've been at it as long as I have on the ACES side, but I think this is not a unique circumstance to this year, but it's particularly acute and noticeable because of the circumstances where to your point, number one, we're filling a hole with money that we were, one-time money. We know that. And yet, in spite of the fact that maybe the hole got a little smaller, we're still going to spend it on people. So I hear you and I get it. And I would just say that for folks newer to this process, like I said, I think the process has been consistent year over year. But I think this year, Georgia, your point is really well taken. And there certainly could have been an appropriate conversation at the school committee saying, well, we have a $360,000 variance. We should consider dropping the approved budget by that variance. And I will say that I did not hear that discussed. That's just a statement of fact. But yes, that was certainly is an option of how to use that 360. I would agree with you.
Right. And maybe it's a part of future budget contract negotiations that date move up a little bit. I mean, I don't know how the date is chosen or what the basis for it is, but I mean, if the date is, let me just say April 1st, why can't it be February 1st?
No, it's a great question.
It's worth a discussion point.
Is
Absolutely.
there any pattern to this? In other words, is the amount this year dramatically higher than last year or previous years, or about the same, or any sense?
It's a good question, Andy.
Retirements?
I don't have an answer for you. No, you're talking about the kind of the positive variance that's creeping into the budget, the approved budget number.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question, Andy. I don't have that data. Sorry.
Yeah. Andy, it may be
So
worse
Bob
this
has
year
his
because of
hand
all the
raised.
COVID issues and, people just getting tired. I don't know, but it's a good question.
Bob, you want to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, first of all, Dave, thanks to you and all the aces for basically being part of two major committees all year. And I maybe should have asked this earlier, but I mean, we've seen all of this discussion about an arts director. And I'd be astounded if that isn't one of the questions raised on the floor of the town meeting. And has the school committee done anything to address or accept responsibility for the fact that it's up to them to make a determination concerning an arts director or not?
Well, it's a good question, Bob, and it kind of gets back to the question I asked Julie early on when it came to Article 6, because I've spoken with the chair of the finance subcommittee and suggested that they be deliberate about their discussions about where these monies will be spent, because there are school committee members and there are members of the public who have publicly tried to pin the school committee down with the news of this variance that it will be spent, for example, on the fine arts director. And the school committee hasn't suggested that they will or they won't definitively. And I agree with you, and it was why I asked Julie the question I did, because I hope that the supplement provides a little bit of guidance on this so that we don't have a arts director fight on the floor of town meeting when in fact maybe the money is already there, despite the fact that it wasn't expressly included in the approved amount. So your point is also a good one, and I think the school committee needs to answer that question for the town, frankly, not us. As we know, it's not our
Yes.
bailiwick.
Didn't their finance subcommittee recommend that they hire a fine arts director with that money? I thought the Hingham Anchor reported that, I believe.
They recommended, I think the 360 is almost enough to cover, with the exception of the sped van drivers, what it could cover out of the additional requests was all of the new hires, with the exception of the 4 adjustment counselors, 1 for each elementary school. But as I said to the chair of the finance committee, I said, well, has anybody asked the parents of kids who would like another adjustment counselor in their elementary school if that's the priority? I mean, there's a priority and there's a determination they're making implicitly in making that hire and not something else. And that's where to Bob's good point, I quickly run out of the room and say, that's not AdCom's purview. You guys need to make sure that parents are clear about what the priorities are and so forth. And we've provided an amount of money.
Sarah?
Sorry, I just took it down. Daveline piped up and asked the exact question I was going to ask. I'm all set.
Okay. Nancy?
I just want to clarify or understand better, I guess, Dave's last point, which was, I thought that the finance committee did recommend within the school committee what the priorities would be. And isn't that their purview to do that?
I don't know if it's the finance committee's purview to bind the school committee. I mean,
committees, though, yeah.
oh, it's definitely the school committees. Absolutely. My only reaction was maybe a more nuanced one, which is that just because the finance committee recommends that that's where it goes, the school committee has yet to take an action on its own behalf to make that determination.
So we would expect, though, that their supplement to town meeting would clarify how the additional monies that they're going to be spending, or how they balance the budget and what they were going to do. So
Yes, I would think that
what I'm saying is
if
the supplement from the school committee should actually say whether or not there's a fine arts director.
yes, I mean, put it this way, the delta between the budget that they've approved, the school committee has formally approved, and the budget that is included in Article 6 is about $850,000. So to the extent that the school committee's supplement is going to say, we now recommend the same budget as AdCom, striking the 850 of new ads, one would think that same document would say, however, we found a way within the constraints of the Article 6 number to make these hires and not make these hires. I would hope that's what it says.
All right, all right, thank you.
I will follow up with the chair of the school committee just to get a little, or make suggestions about the contents of the supplement. Andy?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is for Sue, actually. Does the school committee budget cover all personnel costs of the school hires, or does some of that get included in the municipal side? Medicare, for example, or
shared benefits are shared benefits. That's all employee benefits.
so I guess I'm not misunderstanding. Does the town pay some amount of personnel costs for the school department employees?
Well, the town side has the health insurance, the Medicare, the workers' comp, the unemployment. That's all shared costs between town and school, yes.
And how does it get shared?
It doesn't. It's just in our budgets.
We pay for it. So if the school department made 6 new hires, while they would cover the salaries, the town would cover some of the benefits.
Yes.
Okay. And they don't ever talk about that. Excuse me, I withdraw that comment, but it's true. The second question I have is, do I understand correctly that Dave, they're going to take their plan or tentative plan is to take $300,000 from revolving athletic funds and say they're going to spend it on the tennis courts?
That's, again, it's not been formally decreed, but that was the finance committee's suggestion that, yes, the $300,000 of the revolving fund, I guess, I mean, Sue could explain the accounting to us, but it would basically be a push of 300,000 out of that revolving fund into whatever the town side bucket would be that would pay for now the tennis courts cost $800 and something thousand, if I recall. So
Yeah,
they're not picking up the whole tab. Yeah. So they're picking up, 45% of it or so.
Sue, how would that work?
It's just a journal entry, Andy. We just take their money and we put it into the article, and the rest is from fund balance.
So we're giving them $850,000 to repave resurface the tennis courts. And I guess I don't understand how the accounting function works. with regard to, if
Well,
the
the
town votes for
Cost-
800,
No, the cost is $850,000.
right, the town, let's say, assume the town votes for that. So
Yeah.
now,
Some of
The-
it's, all it says is from available funds. Some of it's gonna be fund balance and some of it's gonna be their revolving fund.
so that would, if they did that, then the town will end up taking $300,000 less from fund balance.
Exactly.
Isn't, so, should we amend the article and say,
We don't have to because the way it's worded, it says available funds. Doesn't matter where the funds are, it's available.
And the school committee supplemental report will include that information. So it's a record for town meeting that those funds are going to go towards it.
but they're not committed to that, correct? They
They're
can say
gonna,
that,
no, they're gonna talk about it at their meeting on April 25th and take a vote or do whatever they need to do to make that official. Yes.
okay, indulge me for one more minute. If you think the education budget is underfunded, and the town has just voted $850,000 to resurface your courts, tennis courts, and you get up at town meeting and say, by the way, we're not going to fund these additional positions or hire these additional guidance counselors. Instead, we're going to pay back the town $300,000 for the tennis courts. I mean, wouldn't parents go crazy if they said that?
Well, Andy, they can only use that revolving fund for certain projects. You can't use the revolving fund to hire people.
But, okay, I just, yeah. I'm done.
They're making use of a fund that they've been building. They put athletic fees into the fund and that's an appropriate use. It's an example of appropriate use for that revolving fund. Daveline?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I recall from the Sustainable Budget Task Force, one of the recommendations was to look at that athletic revolving fund and see if there weren't things that could be paid. So in one sense, I took this when I watched part of that school board meeting, that in fact, that's what the school board was doing. They were looking at, is there some way we can use that fund? And here's a use that you could do. So I took that to be actually a positive side.
You're much more trusting than I am. I mean,
No, I'm not trusting. I said it's a positive sign.
I would take it as a positive sign if they move to amend the article to reduce the 850 to 550. But
Yeah.
You have to vote for the dollar amount for the whole project. It's $864,000. It has to be paid for from available funds, and then accounting wise, they'll work it out. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a good thing that they're giving us money from their revolving fund. But anyone else have any questions? Okay, so that's the ACES update. I'm going to go through just a couple of housekeeping items on upcoming meetings, and then we can have Bob speak if he wants to still talk to us tonight about his remarks, or we can do it another time, whatever you want to do, Bob. But first,
I'll keep it short.
Okay. So upcoming meetings, Thursday, April 28th is the moderators meeting. It's at 7 p.m. It's going to be by Zoom. I was wondering if I could get a hand wave from anyone who cannot make that moderators meeting that night. If you just raise your hand if you cannot attend the moderators meeting. Dave Anderson is raising his hand. Anybody else? And Matt.
It's the same 3 day.
I know. It better be a good vacation, Matt, okay? We want to get updates, pictures. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so the reason why I ask is, you know, we're meeting that night. It's at 7 p.m. If we want to, we could meet separately as an advisory committee for just a bit and vote the reserve fund transfer, because I'm assuming, Sue, that 2 days before town meeting, you'll have that dollar amount then, right?
God, I would hope so.
So I'm going to put that plan in motion just so we can meet quickly before the moderators meeting, just to do that vote. So we don't have to do a separate, what we've done in the last couple of years is have a meeting before town meeting starts on Zoom, and then we go in person to town meeting. And if we can just sort of not have to do that, then why not do that on Thursday night, unless someone can come up with a really good idea. Brenda says yes. Okay. Thank you. So I will set that up and be in touch with you soon about that. And the moderators meeting should not be that long. Dave?
Can you just see if the moderators meeting can be recorded?
Yeah, I'll ask. Good. Okay. Thanks, Dave. I'll let you know. Okay, so then town meeting will begin on April 30th at 2 p.m. And I'll ask that you get there in plenty of time to check in and get comfortable in the stands, as we talked about before. Then the next time advisory committee meets is on Tuesday, May 24th. We have a regular advisory committee meeting, and that night we are going to elect officers for next year. And we are also going to have a general discussion about post-town meeting and the end of the advisory committee year, and just sort of have a general discussion about thoughts and recommendations. So that's May 24th. In early June.
May
Oh.
24th, sorry, I missed the date. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
That's
Thank you.
That's a Tuesday, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sure. Early in June, and I don't know the date yet, I'm waiting to hear about the date, but we are going to finally have that joint meeting among the school committee, the select board, and the personnel board. And this meeting will be an executive session, and the purpose of the meeting is to discuss strategy on collective bargaining, as the school committee will begin its contract renewal negotiations with their unions this fall. Their contracts are up in 2023, but the way they schedule their contract negotiations is that they begin them the fall before. So all those committees will be able to discuss this topic with the personnel board, and the advisory committee can weigh in on the growth of salaries and other concerns that we always have. So I think it's going to be sometime during the first week of June, like either like the 6th or 7th or 8th or something, but I just don't know the date yet, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear that date. Then Saturday, June 11th, the advisory committee has its party from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Hingham Heritage Museum. As AdCom has done every year, except for the last couple of years, we host the party for town volunteers and employees with whom we work together to create the warrant for town meeting. And it's traditionally planned by the first year AdCom members. So thank you, Caitlin and Matt and Sarah, they've already started good work on planning for this party. And to pay for this party, what AdCom has done for years is that every AdCom member is assessed a contribution amount to help pay for the party and for the gifts for the departing advisory committee members. So the fee this year, which is the same as in 2019, is $125 per member. And Caitlin Kirk will be collecting these funds. And I'll let Caitlin talk in just one second about how she wants to collect them. Obviously, you could give her them in person, but there's other ways. Matt has put together an evite or email invitation that's going to be sent out any day now, and it'll have a request for an RSVP. And those are the details right now. But Caitlin, do you want to jump in about that right now, or?
Yeah, sure. So I was thinking, I mean, it doesn't matter how you guys give me the funds, so I can send out an email with my Venmo, also my address if you prefer a check, or you can stop by and drop off the cash, or I can meet you somewhere. So I'll send an email. Yeah, that sounded weird, like under a dark bridge. I'll send an email with some information and some options, and whatever works for you guys, just let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is an and one, right?
Yes, a guest is invited to attend with you. And, every year we have a pretty hefty guest list where all the committees and some town employees and the guest. My recollection and George's recollection that it's about 50% of the guest list actually attends the party. Nancy's nodding her head, yes. So it's not going to be, it's a really nice gathering. I'm glad advisory does it. I enjoy it. Bob and I were planned it our first year and we had to do that last minute switcheroo and location, but it's totally worth it. And it's, anyway, so we hope that we have a good turnout. And if not, well, at least we were able to have it again. So that's nice. And the Heritage Museum has this nice patio space and a little covered porch on the side. So ideally we would be outside on the patio. So
Yeah, they had a nice reception. I don't know if it was last spring maybe, or right as soon as people could gather again. And that patio was seemed like the perfect size for our group too. It was nice.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed for good weather.
Anyone
Don't
have
go
any
off the
questions?
patio, you fall down the cliff.
Very true.
Yeah, so be careful. Make sure you keep that drink count low. Just kidding. Anyone have any questions about the party or about the participation fee? Okay. And then finally, the last AdCom meeting of the year will be Tuesday, June 28th. And we will do any reserve fund transfers that night if needed. And that will be that. Anyone have any questions about upcoming dates? Okay, then I will hand it over to Bob to talk to us.
Well, I guess I'm just going to propose a topic for future discussion because I think it's worth some time. This being my close to the end of my AdCom career, I have started to give some thought to valedictory comments. I'm sure Julie and Dave are way ahead of me on this. And Evan's valedictory comments will probably be the best of all. But I don't know that we've really had any kind of comprehensive discussion of the master plan yet, or of the changing demographics and finances of Hingham. I think in having moved to Hingham in 1976, I think at that time, the financial plan was kind of in line with the old New England saying about use it up, wear it up, make do or do without. And houses cost less than $100,000. And now the average house price is over $1 million. And I think the expectations of our citizens are changing. We have senior demographics and we have younger demographics. And I think we're seeing that in some of the demands for better facilities. And I think it might actually be useful for us to kind of track what our benchmark communities look like in terms of the resources and services and facilities that they're providing to their towns. And I'll end my comments with the discussion I had with the best counselor of my life, my wife Kathy, this afternoon. We were going on our walk, and she talked about when she was a professor at Northeastern. And Northeastern was founded in the basement of the YMCA to basically provide a college education to kids. And for years and years and years, everybody was happy with, gee, I got a great engineering degree or a great accounting degree from Northeastern. But then came the 80s, 90s, and whatever. And all the colleges were building pro-style sports facilities and recreational facilities and all the rest of it. And if you wanted to attract the kind of people that you wanted to be students at your institution, all of a sudden the investment posture changed. And I think Hingham is in somewhat of that same transition. And I think it would be worthwhile for all of the great civic-minded people of this committee to have a discussion and share thoughts about what the implications are for the future, and especially for the future capital planning needs of the town. And I will leave it to you, Julie, to schedule or not, as you see fit, a time block to maybe squeeze that in before the end of the year. I think it's also important for the special town meeting planning that is going to be upon us all too soon.
Yes, thank you, Bob. I mean, we can certainly talk more about this at our meeting on May 24th, because it is, that meeting is a look back at town meeting, but it's really a look back on the year. And I know that for probably as many years as I've been on advisory committee, at least one time of year, we have that really good discussion where unfortunately some of the same topics seem to come up every single year, capital planning and long-term master planning and all that. So I think it's worthwhile, and I think it would certainly fit into our agenda for May 24th. So does anyone have anything they want? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Nope, no, I'm done.
Okay. All right, if anyone has anything to add to what Bob had to say or a question about that, otherwise we're done with our agenda for tonight.
Quickest question. Do you know if the special is going to be in September or October? Has that been determined at all?
They're working on it. They've consulted with the school building committee and the public safety facility committee, building committee, and they meaning the town administrator's office. So I think the idea is to have it in late September, maybe early October. But then there's also the calculation of, do you have a special election immediately following that special town meeting, or do you wait until the November regular election to have the ballot vote for that? And so those questions are being asked, and I know that I've already weighed in on my opinion to the town administrator's office about that kind of stuff, but that stuff is being discussed right now.
Thanks.
Brenda?
Has there been discussion about increasing the town meeting budget to include the second town meeting? Because as I remember, it was a proposal for one that is in this budget, and we now have it planned. It's like, whoops, are we going to get a question about that at this town meeting?
Sue, how are we going to pay for that special town meeting?
There'll be a reserve fund transfer.
That's always that's why we have a reserve fund. That's what we should remind people. That's why we have the reserve fund, so that we can make these unanticipated or somewhat anticipated, but not planned for.
Yeah. So those.
I'll have to go back and
strategies
look. I thought of the elections notes included 2, possibly 3 elections this year.
The elections
I'll have
do,
to go
but
back
it's
and-
not town meeting.
Ah, right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, other matters not anticipated within 48 hours of meeting. All right, seeing none, then may I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we vote. Bob,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Daveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Caitlin,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.